Let's talk to Mike Buckley now. He's a former Labour Party advisor. Good morning to you, Mike.
Morning, great to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Lots to talk about. First of all, I want to talk about Keir Starmer vowing to renegotiate the Brexit deal we got with Brussels to tackle the migrant channel crisis. Or channel migrant crisis. I mean, it's all very well, but more cooperation with particularly with France, but with Brussels generally on this issue. That's a good thing. I've never understood why us being outside the EU should be an issue on this. We're able to cooperate on lots of other security issues, able to cooperate on, supporting Ukraine, etc., why that should be an issue, us not being in the gang anymore. But what would that renegotiation involve?
I'm quite surprised, really, this has been sold as a renegotiation of the Brexit deal, because it is, that's one way of looking at it, but it's quite an odd way to sell what is essentially Keir Starmer saying we want to regain access to Europe-wide police databases, security databases that we'd lost access to when we left the EU because of the nature of the Brexit deal that Boris Johnson chose. So when we left, of course, that disrupted our trading relationship. It disrupted collaboration in things like security and defence and healthcare and medicines and, everything, really. I mean, so much, as we all know, we've all seen the stories in the press over the last few years. But one of the things it did was rip up our agreements between our police force and our military and our intelligence services.
But that was a choice by the EU as well. They're like, if you're not going to play entirely, you can't just have pick and choose. But you know as well as I do, that security and information data sharing is mutually beneficial. So they just carve their own nose to spite their face.
I don't know on this specifically, but I do know there were many things in the EU negotiations where the EU said to the UK, said to Boris Johnson's government, would you like to keep this? And Boris Johnson's government just said no, because they didn't want anything to do with Europe. So, for example, with touring musicians or with journalists access, there are a number of things.
I don't believe you're right on this. I think of all these things, you can keep this, but here's the penalty for it, and then we weren't willing to pay the penalty.
You can read it all. It's written up in multiple books.
Books by people who are happy to sell Britain down. I mean, come on.
Well, lots of people who were in the room, which I wasn't, so all I can do is listen to what they have to say. But anyway, on this, I can't imagine there's anybody in Britain who thinks I don't want British police forces and intelligence services talking to people across the channel, partly about migration, partly about criminality, people breaking the law, people breaking the law here or there and then escaping to the other side, over the channel, trying to get away from the police. It's clearly a good thing if we're able to share databases and our police officers and intelligence services are able to talk to each other.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I agree. And it's a good thing for both. It's a good thing for both sides. Look, our closest allies when it comes to security issues, of course, the Five Eyes. They're, some of those are on the other side of the world. In Australia, for goodness' sake. But here's the thing: one of the concerns a lot of people like Brexiteers like myself have, and the majority of people in this country who do want tighter border controls, certainly on illegal migration, is that one of the things that Keir Starmer wants to do is not just have more data sharing on security, but also to kind of do a deal to tackle this issue in terms of sharing out the problem. Now, that's something that's happened within the EU, called massive ructions between the north and the south, the east and the west within the EU itself. But there's no doubt at all, if we did go and get into a deal to sort of deal with this, it would involve us having a share of the EU's illegal migrants. We'd have our own quota. Now, we're a big country, we're a rich country. We'd end up probably taking more than we already do have. Why would that be in our interests?
I've not heard Keir Starmer or anybody in the government talk about us joining the EU's quota system, and I'd be staggered if that happened, actually. I mean, I can't imagine this government signing up to that, if I'm honest. What I think we have all learned over the last few years is the let's go it alone and secure our own borders route hasn't worked out particularly well, has it? I mean, we've still got loads of people coming over the channel.
Well, we haven't secured our borders. I mean, we could, we just haven't done it.
Without any help from the EU has gone particularly badly. So I think maybe let's try the cooperation route.
Why would the EU and or France suddenly decide to cooperate? Why would they suddenly do that? Why wouldn't they in the first place, and why would they suddenly decide to do that?
Well, it's in everybody's interest.
Well, it was always been in everybody's interest.
And to stop the gangs, and it's in everybody's interest.
Yeah, but it's always been. Nothing's changed there. So why would they suddenly go, in this case we'll help?
Partly because we've had a change of government.
Why?
And as though the last government wasn't... I mean, Richie Sunak, in fairness, was much better than his predecessors, but certainly all Boris Johnson and Liz Truss could do was insult the people on the other side of the channel and actually...
No, they had numerous meetings. They went over repeatedly. Priti Patel, when she was Home Secretary,
and they came back and then they insulted him again in the press. Rishi Sunak, in fairness, was much better.
Emmanuel Macron and various of his leaders have insulted British people, and British politicians numerous times. That's got nothing to do with it.
It's got everything to do with it. This is about relationship and trust in the end, and the trust.
The French threatened to cut off electricity to one of the Channel Islands.
They did what? Sorry.
They threatened to cut off electricity to the Channel Islands. Do you remember that?
I'm afraid I missed that entirely.
When there was a big fishing boat battles. Do you not remember? We were covering it live, minute by minute on the show.
This is a very long time ago. But what is true is that relationships are better between the UK and the EU under this government than under the previous government.
So, because Keir Starmer is a nice Remainer and thinks it's all a bit embarrassing and awful that people voted for that awful bigoted Brexit.
Because he's gone in with a different attitude.
A different attitude. So you're saying, OK, it's in French and particularly French, but also EU interest for them to cooperate, even though it was also in their interest until, July the 5th. They didn't do it. They deliberately didn't do something.
Keir has gone in with different ideas, with specific proposals, for example, particularly around stopping the gangs. So working.
No one thought of that before.
Well, the previous government weren't talking about it.
They were. My God, I've covered that so many times, I can't tell you. I'm bored with talking about that because it never actually happens.
Well, I'm not bored of talking about it because it's an issue that needs to be solved and it's affecting
but it won't actually happen.
People's lives. Well, I'm not as cynical as you, Julia. And
I'm not a cynic. I'm just realistic. I mean, I don't know how many years we could be told we're going to tackle the gangs and then they're going to stop there and then the gangs aren't.
You're right. It hasn't happened, and you're entirely right. Keir Starmer's got some proposals. We haven't seen whether they work or not. But it's incumbent on us to wish him well and to give him a chance. Of course, we want to scrutinise those proposals.
I'd love it if it worked. I just find it fascinating that apparently everything relies on being nicey with the French and with Brussels. And I don't understand why they would suddenly change their mind. They're quite happy to be shot of these illegal migrants. They're not going to help us.
We all know in every part of our lives it's so much easier to work with people who are having a pleasant and easy conversation with us and who seem to like us and think well of us rather than people who are insulting us at every opportunity.
Again, I don't know when all these insults were happening. I'm fascinated to know when this was all happening.
If you look back through the records of Boris Johnson on his trust, it was all about... there was a sea change. Again, credit to Rishi Sunak. When Rishi Sunak came in, he buried the hatchet, which is why we got the Windsor Framework, which has made a huge difference to the people of Northern Ireland, which I'm very, very glad about. But it did largely end the war of words between the UK and the EU, and that was a major step forward. It was a step towards professionalism.
A step towards the EU stopping punishing Britain for a democratic vote to leave.
They were never punishing us. We made all our own choices.
We made our choices, yes, and they punished us for it.
They did not punish us for it.
Yeah. They literally said that that's what they were going to do and then did it. They literally said that.
Well, they said what, sorry?
There are actually quotes from EU officials saying that's what they wanted to do.
Well, that's not been my experience of dealing with EU officials. You'll be glad to hear that.
Well, no, but obviously maybe you're too nicey with them. Yeah, if you want to rejoin and just pay them billions of pounds for nothing, then that's your choice. Can I ask you just also finally...
about rejoining.
Well, that's what we were doing. And look at all that extra money we've got back for the NHS thanks to that bus, Mike?
Hasn't it made a huge difference?
Yeah, well, there you are. Maybe it's not about the money, Maybe there are more issues with the NHS. Anyway, let me ask you about Kemi Badenoch's new shadow cabinet. What we know so far, Dame Priti Patel back in. She's going to be shadow foreign secretary. Chris Philp, former Home Office minister, he's going to be the shadow home secretary. We know Mel Stride, the shadow chancellor, and of course Robert Jenrick, who was the final rival for Kemi Badenoch for the top job. He's in as shadow justice secretary. James Cleverly and Tom Tugendhat choosing not to be part of that shadow cabinet. What do you make of those appointments so far? What do they tell us about what a Badenoch leadership of the Tory party will be?
I think one of the things that is just an obvious point to make is there aren't many Tory MPs left right now.
So you've
got a limited pool of people to draw from.
You've got a load of MPs to choose from, and look what you ended up with.
Loads, exactly, which is great. She's made some interesting choices, I think. Mel Stride, for example, probably more of a centrist person than you would have expected in as shadow chancellor. So she's obviously trying to reach out to different parts of the party. She's put a hand out to Jenrick and given him a job, which is probably a good thing and a comradely thing to do. But I think most of these people, they've not been big enough in the public sphere or in politics at this point for us to really have any understanding of how they're going to perform in the roles that they're going into.
Well, Priti Patel.
Priti Patel is an exception. Obviously, we know what Priti Patel's like, and we know she's unpredictable at times, it would be fair to say. But the rest of them, they've all had, junior ministerial positions in the past, but not been big players. Generally, it's probably the other one who's been a big player in recent years. So I think, to a degree, we'll just have to wait and see how it turns out, both in terms of Badenoch's leadership overall, but also in terms of the calibre of the shadow cabinet.
OK, well, we shall wait and see. So, question the calibre of the shadow versus the real cabinet. Mike Buckley, thank you very much indeed for that.